Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Series 1, The Peoples of Chult and the Peninsula. I'm your guide Graham, and this is Lore Diver, the podcast about lore, world building, and alternative takes on all that sort of information to make your game better and more enjoyable. So this week, before I start, I'm going to do something that I forgot to do last week, and just show off this amazing shirt that was sent to me by the D20 Dames. It is awesome, and if you're not watching their show, you really should, or at least give it a listen. They're fantastic. And yeah, this is easily one of my favorite D&D shirts right now. So I want to get that out of the way because I completely forgot it last week. So what are we doing this week? What is the subject? That is an entirely reasonable question. If you've been following Twitter at all, you'll know that this week we are wrapping it up, finally, on the scaled races of Chult. At least in the sense that we are wrapping it up about the scale races that are associated with the Suruk, which are one of the creator races of Faerun, which was covered way back, I believe it was episode 4. So, yeah, we're finally wrapping it up. However, just as a heads up, we are not out of the weeds yet in any way, shape, or form concerning reptilian potential player races or peoples of Chult. There are still Tortles, there are still Sorials, and I think like maybe and Fire Newts. So there's still some reptilian action to be had. However, we are finally getting this finishing off the creator race bit, and we are doing that, and we are talking about the Naga. And so this is actually going to be compared to previous episodes, a relatively short episode, simply because there was not a ton of stuff on the Naga. I misjudged quite badly and assumed there was more information than there was. So I don't know how long this one's going to be. Definitely longer than 20 minutes, but definitely probably shorter than an hour. So let's kick off as usual with the history in the editions. And I need to start tonight with my first comment about cultural appropriation, about our subject matter in a Lore Diver episode. Unlike previous creatures covered so far in Lore Diver, the Naga are a non-Western, real-world mythological creature. They are associated with South Asian and Southeast Asian cultures, and more specifically those that have been influenced by Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. Now, within this real-world context, and this is something that I feel is important to give before diving into a monster like this, or not monster, but a monster folk group in-game like this, is that in the real-world mythology around them, they are a divine or semi-divine being, or beings that are at least operating on that level. They're capable of assuming human, serpent, and hybrid forms. And there's a whole bunch of wonderful mythology around them and their interactions with humans and all that sort of good stuff, using these abilities to, change forms. There's many varieties of them. They're generally considered to be benign but dangerous. They do have venom, and they are, after all, a divine or semi-divine being. So if you cross them, that is bad news. Unfortunately, what D&D sort of took from this all was that some are associated with water, they guard treasure, and they are crazy poisonous. They didn't do any of the transformation stuff with them, sort of like cut out all that divine, semi-divine stuff, and just sort of made them a snake with a person's face. And then, oddly, in what I can only describe as a bizarre maneuver, they actually ascribed some of their traits to the Yuan-Ti and the Suruk as groups, in particular the ability to transform and sort of that divine status in being able to create other things and stuff like that. So be aware in your games that this isn't the best representation of Nagas. If you run into them in like real world mythology, stuff like that, D&D is not a good example of them. So being aware of that now, let's plunge into exactly how things were in the Forgotten Realms, the area of Chult and the Chultan Peninsula for these creatures. So, Nagas. First and second edition, I can clump these two together. They are in the monster manual. And that's about it. We see the introduction of like Bone Naga, Spirit Naga, Guardian Nagas, Water Nagas, all those sorts of things in and around here. However, they're all just sort of variations on the same theme, that being a snake with a person's face. They do have some different magical abilities. They are innately magical. They are immortal. They don't need air, water, anything else like that. So they're pretty amazing in that thing. Probably the biggest thing that I would draw out of their early representation is that, unlike a lot of other monsters, and actually, no, correction, much like dragons, they were presented as having various subspecies that had good and evil, lawful and chaotic alignments. So, unlike, say, if you run into Yuan-Ti, where they could be reliably said to be evil in game, running into Nagas can be a mixed bag. Some are lawful good, some are chaotic evil, some are lawful evil, some are neutral, including the horrifying Nag Hydra, which I will get to later. So that was an interesting thing, because very few species in the game got that treatment, and yeah, Naga were one of them, which is pretty cool. And that's really about it in first and second edition. They don't really serve a huge purpose in the game, and not that things need to have purpose, but they don't really sort of do anything. They don't fill any niches. They don't fit, for lack of a better term. That all changes, however, in third edition. Now, third edition, the Nagas are added to the list. And what happens here is, in the Serpent Kingdoms, that fantastic book of lore for the for Chult and the Chultan Peninsula, Naga's got a massive upgrade in life. They have a full write-up. Like, I could literally sit here and just like talk, read out this the write-up for them. It's quite fantastic. It's pages upon pages of information on them. They come out to 7 pages in this book. Just about them and their culture and everything else like that. It's pretty fantastic. And the big thing that's done with them is, in order to integrate them into the Forgotten Realms, they were included amongst the races created by the Surrak. They are specifically a human-serpent hybrid, and they were initially created by the Marershalk Surrak, who are apparently the Surrak who are all about creating everything and like trying all the stuff out, as an explorer creation. Like, they wanted to use them to explore the world around them, so I guess they didn't have to leave their cities. Now, this is all pretty cool. Huge advancements. They get a whole bunch of their own deities and everything else like that. Some are like, working with Bane for some reason. Don't know what's up with that. But it's there, and it's valuable, and it integrates them heavily into the setting. In specific, it's into the south of Faerun. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about this in third edition was that they really build up through this book a difference in culture between the cooler north and the warmer south. And that is around serpent people. It talks about, like, up in the north, humans talk about, they're like, oh yeah, I hear there's snake people here, I heard there's this here, I hear there's blah, 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 blah. And they do it all openly, because there's just not a lot of them up there. It's cold. None of them like that. However, in the south, things are different. People don't talk about them as much. People are concerned. People don't want to draw attention to themselves by showing that they have too much knowledge about them, because that's a fast way to get yourself disappeared. And so it builds a sort of level of paranoia into the south. And this is in places like Kalimshan and the Vilhan Reach. So that's, Chisenta and Termish and places like that, and all the way over, to Malhorand and all those places. Like, this is all affected. It's a huge area. You wouldn't know it through a lot of the regular books, but this book really sort of drives that home, and it's a cool cultural shift. And Nagas are expressly included in that, because Nagas are smart, they are inherently magical, they love magic and knowledge, and don't like people talking about them too much or knowing what they're up to too much. So, that's cool. I dig it. 4th edition, Dastardly Deeds. So, as I talked about in the Surrak episode, there's a whole bunch of storylines and plot hooks cropping up, especially in the south of Faerun, about the Suruk coming back. They're reappearing, they're back in Okoth, they've purged the cult of Set, and Seth is back in full strength. And throughout all these areas, a continuous thing that you find are Naga, and specifically the evil ones, because they are acting as more or less interim lieutenants for the Suruk until the Suruk can arrive and sort of take things in hand. And this is especially true in areas without the Yuan-Ti. So you see this quite a bit, and it's really cool, but that's about as far as it sort of goes. They sort of use them as it's a good way to describe it, a mid-level boss sort of thing, like you're enter the dungeon, fight the monsters, and now you're dealing with, you run into a Naga, and that's your mid-level boss as you're on your way to fight the Suruk. Assuming you survive fighting the Naga, which is not a certain thing in any way, shape, or form. So, moving on to 5th edition. They are back in the Tomb of Annihilation, and this was very pleasant. There were some issues. So no spoilers, but Naga do feature prominently in several spots in the campaign, as both villains and assistants towards the party, if you go to the right places. One of the things about Tomb of Annihilation is that it is a hex crawl in many ways. There are many directions to go. There's sort of a lot of side quests and optional things going on, depending on your luck in navigation, what guide you hire in Port Nyanzaru, all that sort of thing. And so it's entirely possible to miss them unless you hit those right places. So I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to spoil anyone's adventures. However, they are there. However, there are problems, as I mentioned. One of which is that their association with the Suruk is absent. That sort of overplot is gone now, and they're back to being sort of, a mid-level boss or a mid-level challenge for the players, as opposed to being part of something bigger than themselves. I mean, they came out better than the lizard folk. At least they were mentioned, and they're actually in the adventure. And they're in the area, which is fantastic because that's, local. Speaking as a locality, that's where they are from. It's where they were created. However, they're not doing everything that they could be doing. Now, their history in the campaign setting. This is some interesting stuff. So the Naga were present until 3rd, and then they actually got integrated into the setting. They were created as an explorer caste within the Suruk pyramid of let's create things to do our jobs for us. And since then have splintered, mutated, changed, favored specific traits over other ones, and turned into a whole bunch of little subspecies, none of which are recognizable as whatever their original Naga was. In an interesting twist, there is no Naga in the game, or at least there hasn't been for some time. The Naga presented in the game are all of specific types, and each type has its own alignment and information. Now, in the main monster manual, you will find the Bone Naga, you'll find the Guardian Naga, and you will find, let's see here, Bone, Guardian, and Spirit Naga. Now, the Bone Naga is it's undead, it hates everything, and is basically being used as a slave by other Naga and other evil beings to do stuff. Fair enough. The Spirit Naga, despite its nice sounding name, is neither spiritual, but fortunately is not undead, and it's evil. It's the bad guy. It wants to charm you, poison you, maybe eat you, use you as a slave, all that sort of thing. And the Guardian Naga is the good one. These are the ones that are friendly, helpful, within reason, all that sort of stuff. However, within Forgotten Realms, there are more Naga. There is the Water Naga, which is a neutral alignment. There's the Dark Naga, which is lawful evil. There's the Iridescent Naga, which is chaotic good. The Banelar Naga, which is lawful evil, and those were water Nagas that were warped or mutated by Bane for his service, which is just a bad deal all around every time, but for some reason people keep going for that sort of thing. There's the Naga, which is sort of like a chameleon-esque Naga that's super evil and hates everything. And then there's the terrifying sounding Nag Hydra, where you have how to even describe this? Okay, so it sounds like they've simply portmanteaued Naga and Hydra together and created a new monster and called it a day. But that's not exactly what's happened here. In some Southeast Asian versions of the Naga, there's a seven-headed one, and it does a whole bunch. I don't know enough about it to discuss it. However, it's a thing. It looks really cool. It's outside some temples. I recommend that you look it up. Just like type in Naga, and see where Google takes you. But it's neutral in alignment, and its representation is really bizarre in the game because it looks like the Naga version of Tiamat. Like, it's got a serpent body that breaks into a bunch of different heads, and each head is a different color, and sort of have different abilities. So, yeah, really odd. I can understand why they called it a Nag Hydra, but it is just weirdness. Anyways, so the only real dates that we have associated with Naga within the area that we're dealing with, that being Chult and the Chultan Peninsula, is minus 2400 Dale Reckoning. And that is the date that they bombshelled out of the Marershalk. So the Yuan Ti are now in charge. They do not like the Yuan Ti. The Suruk are pretty much all gone. And they were designed to be explorers, so they literally get the hell out of Dodge. Like, they are gone. And they head out into the rest of the realms to seek fortune and adventure. And it's kind of interesting because going through the material, it talks about how they, maintain sort of the loose society and loose knowledge of each other and how they become individually powerful. They never actually really form a nation except for Naga, which is up north, and is something that I will talk about at a different date, because that is it's a whole separate ball of wax. So yeah, kind of weird. Anyways, but that's actually the only date that's associated with them. There's nothing else until the Spell Plague era. And the Spell Plague era is where we have all that stuff about the Suruk. So this is the 4th edition era. And all of a sudden you have various evil Naga coming into it and being lieutenants, running things, getting the lizard folk and other groups in order to better serve their masters, the Suruk. And pretty much the big takeaway that I get from that is that they're making all these places more dangerous, more organized, more capable. They're lending arcane and divine spellcasting ability to them and all that sort of thing. And then you also get the mentions of them being associated with Pterafolk, which I'll get into in a moment, with the current state in the campaign setting. So what is the current state of the Naga? Well, they're a monster, and that's about it, actually. They appear in the Tomb of Annihilation. They're in the monster manual with the 3 basic ones that I discussed, Guardian, Spirit, and Bone variants. And that's all. All the other variants that were known to the Forgotten Realms, Water Naga, Dark, Iridescent, Banelar, Hanaga, Nag Hydra, all absent. And all we can assume, big assumption here, is that whatever was going on in 4th edition, if that is indeed still happening, then that's their plot line right now, moving forwards. And if that's not what's happening, then they're just a super dangerous pop-up target for your players to encounter. So now my take on how it could be done, maybe they're a bit more into their history, how to integrate them into things. So as I said, they have a fantastic, if short, history written up in the Serpent Kingdoms. And it's largely concerned with their spread around the place, and then just how they're sort of chilling out and not doing a whole bunch of things. It does give some background into like how they transform. Let's see here, some dark and spirit Nagas, sought out ancient rituals of the Suruk and turned themselves into Ha-Nagas. Water Nagas tried to reverse the fragmentation of their species and accidentally created Nag Hydras. So there's all sorts of like weird stuff going on where they're interacting with ancient magics, which is pretty par for the course on Forgotten Realms. If you're digging into that, which I fully recommend that you do. But how do they fit into the Suruk thing? Well, my take on it and my theory on it is the Suruk were the first, or sorry, not the Suruk, the Naga were the Suruk's first experiment in intelligent, independent creations. Like truly intelligent. Lizard folk and all those were one thing. The Pterafolk were a living weapon. This was an attempt to create something that was smart. They wanted something they could explore. They wanted something to get out and think independently by itself. And so they created the Naga. And there's all sorts of what I think would be unforeseen consequences, such as their amazing spellcasting abilities and all that sort of thing. It was sort of a byblow. The goal was serpent thing, human, snake, cross. Hopefully it'll be smart and have venom to protect itself. Oh, wow, look, it's got magic. Okay, this is doing a lot more than we thought it would do. So they were created like that, and along with the Pterafolk, I think that they were adding into the lessons learned that went into creating the Yuan-Ti, namely things like adding a kill switch, so they can maintain full control over them. And they were essentially, as I would see it, allowed into production, much like the Pterafolk, because they filled a specific need. They needed explorers. They didn't want to go around or go about having to go through all the motions of doing this all over again, so let's stick with what we have. Now, that's awesome, and it actually fits in well with the whole pairing with the Pterafolk thing in Antiquity, because one of the big things about the Suruk arc during the Days of Thunder was they had a very almost Romanesque rise and fall. Like they just, they hit the heights of power and then just slide into decadence and all that sort of stuff. The standard sort of beliefs about Rome, decadence, laziness, don't want to do anything, that happened later on in the Empire is how the Suruk went. And so they're at the point where they no longer want to lead their armies in battle as much anymore or put themselves at as much risk. So what do? They pair up the Pterafolk with the intelligent Suruk that they've created, and specifically with the Spirit Suruk, and that, or not Spirit Suruk, the Spirit Naga, and that is a big thing because the Spirit Nagas are the evil ones. And that pairs up very nicely with how the Pterafolk were supposed to be, this dangerous force. They're a weapon, a living weapon, and they're being led by evil Spirit Nagas, which just has all sorts of horrifying implications. So another thing with the Naga is that they have a love of knowledge and magic. And oh, yeah, it does say Pterafolk. Wow, I am right. Good call. Thank you for catching that. I should probably be paying attention. Let's see here. See if I can. Oh, there it is. I'm just going to change this on the fly. Thank you very much for that. Would have been. There we go. That's better. Thank you very much, Mad Tinkerer, for catching that. Well, I'll chalk this up to experience and say, yep, that's the thing that happened to me tonight. Okay, so now that I've corrected my my label at the top of my my stream here, so that it's actually accurate for what I'm covering tonight. Love of lore and knowledge and magic. It's what they have. And that is fantastic, especially if you're operating in and around Chult, because, damn it, Chult is packed with magic. Mesro was one of, arguably, probably the most divinely magical place on Faerun that I can think of. I mean, it was a city that was literally made by a god, and that is super rare. So finding out information about that would probably be clocking pretty high on the radar of most Naga, especially trying to find out what happened to it, and whether or not there's anything left in it that they can use or learn from, which opens up a whole bunch of great opportunities for them being engaged with player characters to hire them to go find Mesro, poke around to the ruins, and maybe deal with some of those pesky undead, so that they can do some research or learn some stuff from what's left there. The next up is our good friends, the Ashowe. So the Ashowe, if you remember all the way back in episode 1, they were the human Chultans who went hard for arcane magic. And that is fantastic. That is a great mix with, the sorts of things that the Naga are into. And yeah, why not have them maybe working with the Ashowe to reclaim places like Orlungo and other settlements and areas that they once held, in an effort to try to get access to some of that magic they were using. Because, I mean, after all, the wizards of the Ashowe successfully managed to raise Obteo's shadow out of the ground, enslave it, and send it against Mesro to attack. That's some pretty epic magic right there. So, might be something that the Naga are interested in. The next one is forward against their old masters. So, lizard folk are generally neutral. A lot of the scaled folk are. Pterafolk are, neutral or evil and highly predatory. Yuan Ti are categorized in the game as being evil, just unrelenting evil. Not a fan of that, but here we are. Fortunately, the Naga have a built-in failsafe for that. And that being, they have multiple alignments. And they have, insofar as I can tell, no obligation to follow the commands of their former masters, the Suruk. And that's awesome, because that means that you can have a legit split between them. You can have Naga who are all about the return of the Suruk, the Spirit Nagas. The Spirit Nagas, probably the Ha Nagas, all these ones, Dark Nagas, all the ones who, love what the Suruk were all about. Want to conquer the place, get rid of all these stinky mammals, all that sort of thing. That's awesome. On the other hand, you've got your iridescent Nagas. You've got your guardian Nagas, and these are the ones that are, going to most likely try to stand against the Suruk, because the Suruk are all about enslavement and killing, pretty much everything that they want to, mutating the rest of it. It's a bad scene all around. So, yeah, just something handy and nice for you if you are planning a campaign or story in the area, is that you can use Naga on both sides of it to aid or hinder the party. You can even have antagonists, or not. Well, yeah, obviously antagonists, but you can even have protagonists. If you want to do the conversion work to allow players to be Naga, that is there. So, speaking of influence and all that sort of thing, Bane's influence and the warping of the water Nagas. So, Bane has the Banelar Nagas. They worked with Cyruk for a bit, but now Bane's back. They're all about him, and they are some of the most horrifying and evil creations out there. I mean, like, they're literally following the god of murder. That's never good for anybody. And Bane is eager to get more worshippers out, because now you have a situation in the realms where and this is insofar as I know, canonically, all the deities are back. Every single bloody one of them. Everyone that was alive, dead, missing in action, whatever, they're all back and alive. And that means, especially within the context of Faerun, they are all jockeying for worshippers. Like, they need them bad, because that's how they get their power. It's like sort of a bit of a symbiotic relationship they have. They provide divine magic and intervention, and the number of worshippers they have, provides them with power, status, and the ability to exist. So Bane is probably going to be eager to get a lot of Nagas on side, because they are amazing murder machines, and their deities are really odd. And as I said, like, I think at some point in the future, I'm going to do more episodes going into more depth about some of these races and peoples, because there's a lot of stuff here, and the Naga deities are at the top, near the top of that list, because there's a lot of stuff going on there that needs to be unpacked and looked at, because it really alters a lot of the things about how some of the divine systems of Faerun work. So, moving on, pairing up with the Pterafolk, we talked about that. We talked about the Pterafolk episode. I cannot stress enough how much you should pair up Spirit Nagas with your Pterafolk, and give the Pterafolk back their transformation powers, and then use them to harass the hell out of your player characters every time they enter any sort of area that looks vaguely open. Like, have fun with it. It is a fantastic combination. It is great for a mid to even like low high level encounter, because the Spirit Nagas are lending that extra little bit of arcane and divine magic into the mix. So definitely, like, get that together, do it, use it, have fun with it, and then I guess just blame me when your player's like, "What's wrong with you? Why are you doing this to us?" The last big thing that I'll talk about with them, for like how I see them possibly being, is that I could see them very much bankrolling adventurers. I mean, I understand, within the lore as presented, that they have a very strong urge to explore. They love knowledge. They love gathering knowledge, all that sort of stuff. They can only be so many places at once. And it makes sense to me to have them bankrolling adventurers to do jobs for them, to go out and check out ruins, to recover artifacts, to get scrolls, raid ancient, lost libraries, all that sort of stuff. Like, there's a whole like campaign. There's whole campaigns you could run just off that alone. And on top of this, they have this. They see other creatures as being lesser and in need of guidance, and even good aligned Nagas would see this as like, oh, like, these people are better off without having all this knowledge just laying about willy nilly. I'll help them out. I'll lend a hand and get them to bring it on over into me, and I'll have this knowledge, and then they don't have to worry so much about it. There's also so many potential conflicts going on there. I mean, like, just like inside of Chult and the Chultan Peninsula, there's a whole bunch of stuff. There's a whole bunch of potential there, especially with Samrach being, so as magical it is, Halrua being back up at the far end of the peninsula. And then, if you wanted to go further afield with that, I could very easily see Naga in competition with groups like, say, the Red Wizards of Thay, to try to recover knowledge and information, of an arcane sort. So there's a lot to do there. And yeah, overall, like, I really think that the Naga are a bit of a mixed bag. They suffer from some of the issues around, monster cultures and like monster folk cultures and so on that a lot of D&D groups do. But on the other hand, unlike so many other monsters and monster folk, at least they were given some nuance. So there's at least some good, some evil, and some neutral ones. So you can really sort of mix it up. I mean, they don't all have to be friendly. They don't all have to be bad guys. And I think that gives them more utility as a tool for a dungeon master to use. And as for playing them, like, I think that they're entirely playable. Let's see here. I'll just bring up the book here. Um, yeah, like they're listed as being a playable character way back in third edition. You know, like, it's, you want to play one? Okay, here's some extra rules for them, and that's awesome. You know, like, it gives them as something else you can add. Unfortunately, insofar as I'm aware right now, in 5th edition, there's no official canonical rules for playing one, so that kind of that sucks. But it is doable if you're willing to do some conversion work, or if you want to head over to the DM Guild. I'm sure someone there has converted them over, and I think that if you have a player who wants to play as one, definitely let them do it. However, go into it with them being aware that Naga are, unlike lizard folk and a lot of the other like humanoid species that are available for players to use, they are definitely inhuman looking. Unless you give them some magical item that lets them transform, or if you give them back their ability to transform from real world mythology, you know, the player needs to be aware they are playing an extremely large snake with a human-ish face and some frills, and that may cause some issues in certain places where they go. So that's something you need to be aware of. But again, I think it's doable. I think that it's, especially in the area of Chelton Peninsula, that seeing Naga, especially the neutral and good aligned ones, in and around human settlements, would not be as rare or sort of scary as is implied. I think that would be something that people would be more comfortable with, simply because they know that some Naga are evil, some Naga aren't evil. Just got to be able to identify them, and given that they all have very distinctive coloration, it's a doable thing. And yeah, that's it for Naga tonight. As I said, a bit of a shorter episode, mostly because I badly overestimated the amount of information that not only I had, but that was available about them. However, next episode, we are taking a break from all this scaled and reptilian nonsense, and we're going to take a look at the Tabaxi, those adorable cat folk that share a name with one of the human ethnic groups of Chult, and that have in many ways polarized the D&D community in ways that I have not seen since Kender were popular as a playable race. People hate them, people love them. I have not seen a lot of people who have been, you know, sort of like in the middle of the road or neutral about them. So, thank you very much for listening. This has been Lord Iver, the POCGamer podcast. If you liked what you heard, please like and subscribe. If you'd like to see more, head over to my blog, POCGamer.com, and check out POCGamer on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. If you would like to support this podcast, there's links to my coffee and a brand new Patreon that I have set up on my blog and in my social media. Music was provided by purple-planet.com. There we go. I always mess that up. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.